Savannah, Georgia, a summer dusk. The air is thick with humidity and old ghosts. She dials his number. She doesn't press send. She scrolls through photos like they still mean something. But the silence now, it doesn't ache like it used to. It speaks, and it says, "He's not yours anymore, not because someone else took him, but because he reclaimed himself." This is the quiet evolution of a man, not loud, not bitter, just changed. 1. She thought you'd stay the same, you didn't. In Portland, Oregon, Marcus used to be the kind of man who kept promises no one asked him to make. He'd send her a good morning every single day, rain or shine, even after she stopped responding. Some mornings, he'd stare at the blinking cursor for a full minute before typing it anyway. It wasn't desperation, not then. It was hope, thin and quiet, like mist on the Willamette River. But time has a way of revealing what silence means. And one day he didn't send the message. Not because he was angry, but because he had finally heard what her silence was trying to say. He started waking up without checking his phone. He brewed his own coffee instead of waiting for connection. He walked along Alberta Street alone, not lonely but full of breath of thought of himself. She thought she could put him on pause, that emotions could be frozen, catalogued, returned to like a favorite page in a book. But Marcus closed that chapter, not with bitterness, with ink, with choice. Now she scrolls through his life like she's trying to catch a train that already left the station. The route has changed, the destination too, and the man who once waited on her every mood. He's gone, rewritten. Reflection. She remembered the boy who needed her, but healing gave birth to the man who didn't. So you no longer need her to feel whole. In Austin, Texas, Derek once believed love meant orbiting her world. Every plan, every playlist, every quiet hope was arranged like a constellation around her mood. A simple hey from her could lift his heart 3 feet off the ground. But silence? Silence gutted him. He used to count the minutes between her replies like they were proof of his worth. Back then, he didn't realize how hollow he'd become, so full of her that there was no room left for himself. But seasons change, even in Texas. Now, Derek hikes the Barton Creek trails at sunrise, the mist curling around his boots like memory learning to let go. He doesn't check his phone. He just walks, steps steady, breath calm, grounded in something deeper than hope. He still thinks of her sometimes, but not as a need. More like a story he once told himself, beautiful but unfinished. At the farmer's market, he grinds fresh beans and smiles at the woman selling lavender soap, not to impress, but because the morning smells like newness. He reads Cormac McCarthy Under the Oak, not to escape, but to be still. She used to be his oxygen. Now he breathes just fine on his own. Reflection. There's a quiet kind of power in not needing what once consumed you, because when a man stops waiting to be chosen, he starts choosing himself. And that's the beginning of wholeness. Chaktirt, you're unavailable in ways that matter most. In Chicago, the wind doesn't ask permission to change. Neither does Ben. There was a time when her photo would have unraveled him. A soft glance over her shoulder, that familiar smirk. He would have stared at it for too long, heart caught between nostalgia and false hope. Back then, her digital breadcrumbs were enough to pull him back into the storm. A thinking of you post, a sad quote, a song lyric. She knew exactly what string to pluck. And he was always tuned for her melody. But that man doesn't live here anymore. Now when he sees her name on the screen, it's like hearing a song you once loved too much. Familiar, but distant. He doesn't replay it. He doesn't ache. He scrolls past with the same detachment he's earned in long, silent nights of learning himself. She still has his number. She could still text. But what she doesn't understand is this. It's not about blocking access. It's about becoming the kind of man who no longer bends at the sound of old doors creaking open. Ben didn't become cold. He became unavailable to confusion, to cycles, to manipulation dressed as affection. Reflection. He's not unreachable to the world, just to the one who once mistook his heart for a playground. Because when a man chooses peace over pattern, he stops being predictable and starts being free. 4. You stopped seeking closure. She's searching for it now. In a walk-up apartment in the East Village, the lights from the street cast long shadows on the hardwood floor where he once paced. He used to lie awake, phone on his chest, replaying her last text like it was scripture. Take care. 2 words that felt more like a door closing than a blessing. He read them 100 times, looking for a crack in the goodbye that never came. Was she angry, confused, sad? Or worse, indifferent? But time has a way of peeling illusions off the walls. Closure didn't arrive in the form of her explanation. It arrived one morning quietly as he shaved, watching himself in the bathroom mirror. That man staring back? He wasn't waiting anymore. He wasn't aching for an apology that would never come. Instead, he brewed his own peace. He began speaking softly to his own reflection, not because he was broken, but because he had finally become the one he'd been waiting for. Meanwhile, she scrolls through old threads, trying to decode the moment he slipped away. She's the one piecing together a puzzle she never thought she'd lose. But he's not lost. He's just not where she left him. Reflection. Closure doesn't always come wrapped in reasons. Sometimes it looks like a man who no longer checks his phone at midnight. Sometimes it looks like peace, earned, not granted. And sometimes it looks like him, smiling in the mirror. 5. She lost access, not because you blocked her, but because you elevated. In Colorado Springs, the air is thin, and Ethan learned to breathe differently. Not because of the altitude, but because of everything he let go of. There was no dramatic announcement, no cryptic song lyrics posted at midnight, no unfollowing, no revenge glow-up. He simply began waking up earlier, started hiking Cheyenne Mountain before sunrise, not to distract himself, but to feel himself moving upward, step by step. He joined a local woodworking class, found the rhythm in shaping things with his hands. The same hands that used to type long paragraphs, begging to be understood. She didn't even notice at first. She still assumed he'd be where she left him, in the old familiar spaces, liking her stories, orbiting quietly. But when she reached out, there was no response. Not anger, not silence as punishment, just absence. Not the kind that slams doors, the kind that doesn't need to. He didn't block her. He didn't need to. Because he had risen to a level she no longer recognized. A level where games look small and peace feels sacred. Reflection. Some doors don't need to be closed. They simply become irrelevant when you walk higher. True elevation doesn't announce itself. It just leaves the noise behind and keeps climbing. 6. You're not cold, you're controlled. In Nashville, Tennessee, where the songs bleed heartache and the bars hum with memory, he used to be the man who fought to be heard. Every argument felt like a courtroom, every silence from her a sentence. He raised his voice not to win, but to be seen. He thought if he just explained well enough, she'd understand the shape of his love. But somewhere between the last fight and the first quiet walk down Broadway alone, something shifted. He no longer rushed to defend himself. He no longer unraveled just because she questioned his heart. Now he listens, not because he agrees, but because he no longer needs to prove. When she accuses him of being distant, he smiles gently. Because he knows he's not cold. He's careful. There's a difference. His love didn't vanish. It just stopped pouring into holes that never held water. He used to be impulsive. Every word a reaction. Every silence filled with panic. Now, he breathes, he pauses, he chooses. She calls it indifference. But it's not. It's the quiet strength of a man who's mastered the space between emotion and expression. Reflection. Emotional control isn't a lack of feeling. It's the art of not handing your peace to those who mistook it for weakness. Sometimes the greatest act of love is not rising to the noise, but rising above it. Chapter 7. You're focused on legacy, not loops. In Phoenix, Arizona, where the desert sun bakes memory into bone, Jamal sat beneath the ceiling fan of his one-bedroom apartment and scrolled through months of old messages. Every "I miss you" that led nowhere. Every half-hearted promise. Every breadcrumb he once mistook for connection. Then, with a long exhale, he deleted it all, not out of anger, but because he finally understood the difference between reflection and repetition. He wasn't erasing the past. He was honoring it by no longer living in it. These days, Jamal rises early. He journals not about heartbreak, but about purpose. He teaches boxing drills to a 15-year-old kid at the community gym, the same place that once helped him find his footing. He invests in the kind of future that won't ghost him. She still watches his stories sometimes, still likes the occasional post, but he doesn't post for her anymore. He doesn't live in reaction. He lives in direction. Legacy isn't loud. It's in the quiet acts, the meals prepped, the books read, the goals tracked. It's in the way he shows up now, not as a man hoping to be loved, but as a man becoming someone worth remembering. Reflection. Loops keep you chasing. Legacy keeps you building. One is a circle, the other a path. And Jamal? He's not walking in circles anymore. A sheet. Her influence faded the moment you chose yourself. In New Orleans, the nights hum with jazz and ghosts, and once he was haunted by her silence. It crept under his door like smoke, filling the room with questions. Why hadn't she responded? What had he done? He'd stare at the ceiling until dawn, replaying the last things he said, wondering if he was too much or not enough. She had the power to shift his whole day with a delay in her reply, and she knew it. But one night, just after a thunderstorm rolled through the quarter, he lit a candle, opened the window, and didn't check his phone. The breeze smelled like rain and freedom, and he realized her silence didn't hurt anymore. It simply meant nothing now. These days he listens to Coltrane as he falls asleep. Deeply, easily, no messages sent, no screens checked. When she sends an emoji at midnight, he sees it and lets it float away like a streetcar heading in the wrong direction. He doesn't hate her. In fact, there's still a soft gratitude in him for the lessons she never meant to teach. But he no longer plays roles to earn affection. He's chosen peace over performance. Reflection. Her grip wasn't broken by confrontation. It faded the moment he chose stillness over craving. That's how manipulation dies, not with fire, but with disinterest. 9. She doesn't recognize the man you've become. That's the point. In Sacramento, on a warm Saturday morning, the scent of ripe peaches and fresh basil drifted through the air at the farmer's market. She didn't expect to see him. He stood by the honey stand, holding a jar in one hand, a canvas tote slung casually over his shoulder. Same posture, same soft eyes. But something had shifted. He wasn't scanning the crowd like he used to, searching for a familiar face or a reason to stay. He was there for himself, rooted, calm, unbothered. She approached with a half smile, playful and unsure. "You've changed," she said, like it was a discovery. He returned the smile, slow and steady. "I have," he answered without apology, because he had. He no longer needed her to recognize his progress, for it to be real. The man who once needed validation now lived in a space far beyond her reach. He wasn't rude. He wasn't cold. He just wasn't hers to read anymore. She thought change would come with fireworks, but it came in stillness, in the way he no longer leaned in, no longer lingered, no longer tried to prove. Reflection. Sometimes the greatest transformation is the one someone else can no longer name. You're not meant to be understood by the person who only ever saw fragments of you. You're meant to become someone whole, regardless. 10. The story didn't end, it evolved without her. In Asheville, North Carolina, tucked inside a corner coffee shop with brick walls and faded jazz playing overhead, he sat by the window with a worn notebook and a cinnamon latte. The story poured from him, not the one he once begged her to be part of, but a new one. No longer a story about longing. Now it was about becoming. He didn't write to impress. He didn't write to be heard by her. He wrote because there were parts of him still waiting to be born, parts that only rose after she left. Someone asked him what inspired the piece. He didn't hesitate. "Someone who thought they paused me," he said. "But really, they propelled me." There was no bitterness in his voice, just calm. Like a man who finally realized heartbreak wasn't the ending, it was the edit. A sharp one, a painful one, but necessary. She thought the story froze when she walked away, thought maybe someday it could pick up where it left off. But he didn't just turn the page, he changed genres. Now his story has rhythm, legacy, a spine stronger than before, reflection. Some people are not meant to stay in your narrative. They're meant to shake the plot and exit. Not every chapter is a love story. Some are the break that made space for your real beginning. Closing line. You didn't harden, you refined. What once felt like coldness is now simply clarity. You don't flinch, you don't chase. And that unsettles her, because she expected you to remain the man who once waited in the shadows of her silence. But you've stepped into the light, not to prove a point but to find your path. And she no longer recognizes you, not because you vanished, but because you finally arrived. That's not the heartbreak. That's the healing. She was a chapter. You became the author. This is Stoic evolution, the quiet, focused transformation of a man who finally chose his own worth and never needed to explain why.